So, who here has heard of emotional freedom techniques or uses it, or, yeah, so some of us have experience with it. Who here has never heard of EFT and thinks that we're going to tap dance tonight? I once did a meetup somewhere where we were tapping and people actually thought I was doing tap dance. But no, we're all okay. So I'm going to express some of my understanding, some of what I've learned, and also introduce some of the science, and also give you some resources where you can dive deeper. I am not a scientist and I'm not even a researcher. And honestly, the reason that I've always been drawn to this particular technique or other techniques as well, energy psychology techniques or cognitive somatic techniques, is because I tend to be more in the energetic realm, and I felt shifts and differences, and that's what drew me in, and that's what inspired me to learn more about it. However, we have a great wealth of research now, and we actually have one of the prominent researchers in this field sitting in the room. I'm very honored that Dr. David Feinstein came to honor us tonight, and I hope I'm not embarrassing you, but...
I came to learn some things.
Oh, I don't know about that. And this is his book here, by the way, his newest book, which I'll talk about later. It's a great resource. But yes, so I will tell you from my perspective how it's affected me, how it affects the lives, and then give you some of the evidence that we're finding, some of the research, and again, I'm going to direct you to places where you can dive much deeper, because there's lots of wonderful evidence, even MRI brain scans now, which are showing shifts in the neurology when you're practicing these techniques, which is really exciting. What's most exciting to me is that, you know, the Western mind has to understand why it's working, you know, and have evidence. And honestly, I mean, there's a movie that was made a few years ago by, I think Alina Frank and Craig Wiener actually made the movie, The Science of Tapping, and I showed it a few times. In Talent at a library, but I also showed it to a couple of doctors, and they loved it, and they were all in. But then a week later, they weren't I mean, they didn't have the experience, so they weren't really integrating it. And I think that that's why it's most important to have not only the knowledge and the understanding of what it could potentially do, but if you experience it, it makes it real. It's something, it's like, you know, you're doing something that's helping you and you want to share it with the people that you care about. So I'd like to just tell you a little bit about what brought me here. And first of all, I am trained in clinical EFT, which is probably the form of EFT that's been most researched. So I'm trained in clinical EFT. I'm also trained in something called matrix reimprinting, which is a deeper way of applying EFT. You utilize the practices of EFT and you go more into the memories. I mean, you can do that with EFT as well, but matrix is shown to be maybe a little bit more advanced way of taking the charge out of some challenging memories and helping you to reprocess and reframe so that you can have a better present reality. Energy in motion is sort of something I learned from somebody named Sylvia Hartman. I also did her training, energy EFT, and that's sort of in the realm of Reiki, where you're feeling energy in the body and you're encouraging it to move. So you're addressing blockages in the flow and you're encouraging it to move with intention and attention. And then advanced Psyche facilitator. So Psyche was a process that began with a man named Rob Williams, who actually, I just learned, passed away not that long ago. And it was basically based on are you familiar, if you're familiar with brain gym, it's like educational kinesiology. Like they've learned that certain movements of the body can affect learning. And so Rob Williams took the findings from, I believe his name was Jameson, and he created educational kinesiology, because in the classroom it was helping with attention deficit, learning disabilities. By movements of the body, you could activate parts of the brain. And then he put it into a practice about using muscle testing to define or to find beliefs, like core beliefs that were not in alignment with your highest good. And to use a process like whole brain integration to change those core beliefs. And that was really my first step into realizing that, you know, our beliefs, our core beliefs about who we are, our paradigm, our models of who we have learned ourselves to be actually inform every area of our life. And what I've learned with EFT is, because the practice has been shown to regulate the nervous system and activate the parasympathetic response, so you're more present, you're more in your body, you can get to the beliefs, the deeper beliefs that are driving the challenges that are in your life. So I wanted to just share a little bit of my background. I'm also a Kripalu yoga teacher, and yoga was actually my first step into living in my body, because at a very young age I came into an environment that my mother had mental health issues, my father had a gambling addiction, and there was a lot of trauma, and I learned to self-medicate with food, and I was very overweight as a kid, and I numbed myself. And then as a teenager, got into other addictions, and so I had a lot of addictive behaviors to sort of help myself feel better, or to anesthetize myself from a lot of unresolved trauma in my body. And that was really the driver that had me learn all of these techniques, was like my own healing. So in my early 20s, I somehow had this spiritual experience and felt that if there was a creator, a kind creator, that there was something on the other side of this, like the suffering, the emotional and physical suffering that I was experiencing. Like there had to be answers to this. And I think that that's been my drive, of just believing that, you know, this is not my birthright to live with all of this emotional and physical pain. And so learning a lot of these techniques has really been the driver of me having peace with myself, being free of addictive behaviors, living a more integrated and whole life. And I started around 2005 when I did my yoga teacher training. I started, even though I was a teacher, I was an elementary school teacher, I started coaching other people that were struggling with similar issues as me. And yoga brought me into my body, because up until then I lived in my head. And I feel like that's a lot of like addiction. Like the head is trying to solve it, but the problem is in the body, right? So there's this disconnect. And so the world of yoga just brought me into more of a somatic approach to addressing and healing some of my own childhood trauma. And I always felt that, you know, it was like I became a school teacher. It was like teaching is just like a natural thing for me. And I think for me, it's like when I'm excited about something, when I learn something, I just want to share it. And I think that that is, you know, that's the kind of teacher that I am, in just sharing what I have experienced. So my yoga practice brought me into studying Psych K, and then from there, I remember I used to live in Crestone, Colorado, and I was teaching in a charter school there, and I was sick for like a weekend, and my husband was telling me about EFT, but I didn't really practice it. And I stumbled upon Gary Craig's videos, and Gary Craig is the founder, the creator of EFT. And I spent a weekend just following the videos, and I was at the end of the weekend, I felt such shifts in my emotional, physical body that I just picked up the phone and I was like, I need to get trained in this. And then it was, you know, that was the beginning of the story. And so that's a little bit about my background. It's a little bit about what has driven me up to this point to do this work, to share this message of healing. And it's one of the practices that I integrate in my work with clients or with groups, because I feel like I like to, you know, use a holistic approach. And so I feel that sometimes, you know, just being in tune with a person, having an organic process of what's needed to help that person to evolve, whatever's going on for them. So this is emotional freedom techniques, also known as tapping. I'm not actually sure. I think it's the 1980s or so, and please correct me if I'm wrong. When Gary Craig was the founder of EFT, and prior to that, what happened was there was a man named Roger Callahan who he worked with clients with behavior modification, and it was really slow going. He was trying to help people with phobias. He was working with this woman, Mary. It was sort of the famous Mary story that most EFT practitioners know about, because she had a water phobia, and he was doing behavior modification practices with her, and it took a long time to make any progress. But he was also studying meridian therapy. He was also studying Chinese medicine, meridian therapy, and he decided to maybe connect some of this with his work with Mary, because she mentioned to him that every time she thought about putting her foot in water or immersing herself in water, she would get pain in her stomach. And so he had her gently stimulate this point here on her face, and the pain in her stomach relaxed. And then she said to him that she thought that she could immerse her foot in water. And that began a whole practice of something called thought field therapy, which is still happening today, where there's different algorithms where you stimulate various meridian points to help with various phobias. But Gary Craig, who learned from Roger Callahan, he was an engineer, and he realized that you can do a basic recipe of tapping points and it will have the same effect with physical and emotional issues. So he founded EFT, and since that time, though, there's been a lot of understanding, a lot of research, a lot of trying to figure out. Somebody always over here said, I don't know how it works. And there's more understanding as to why or how it is working. And yet, as I shared before, I like to say that, you know, the proof is sort of in the pudding. Try it. It doesn't really cost anything to try and see if you notice anything. I did get a chance to teach it in the classroom when I lived in Crestone. The parents were really happy to have me teach the children, and it worked wonderful with attention deficit. Now, I'm saying this from experience. I'm not like a medical doctor. I'm not prescribing anything. This was my experience. That my children that had test-taking anxiety, it was like they were at ease. They soared that year, those kids. So much so that the director of the school had me do a presentation at Prescott College, just talking about the findings of what, it wasn't like a set-up research, but what was happening in my classroom was really phenomenal. The kids weren't fighting with each other. They were able to perform on stage with confidence. The anxiety level was really down when they had to take tests, so it was pretty phenomenal. Kids are really receptive to this. So, clinical trials have shown that tapping can rapidly reduce the emotional impact of incidents and memories that trigger emotional distress. After that, the body will rebalance and accelerate healing once the distress is reduced, or oftentimes, you know. You can go to like YouTube and you can find lots of videos. As a matter of fact, I have a YouTube channel that's pretty popular, and it's wonderful. They are wonderful. However, if you are struggling with some core issues or some big T traumas, or it's really important to get some professional help, because it can be very effective, and yet the most effective responses are the most, you know, when you're most, what is the word? When you're most focused, the more specific you are. Lost it for a minute. The more specific you are, the more effective it can be. That being said, it is easily self-applied. As a matter of fact, I encourage my clients to just do a little tapping morning and night, just to help to regulate their nervous system, just to calm down their body. Because I believe so many of us are in a constant dysregulated space, whether it's from our family of origin or what's going on in the world, and we're picking it up. Some of us pick that up in the womb of our moms, you know. And so if you take some time to drop into your body, do some practices. I like to meditate, but I usually will tap before I meditate, because it calms down the monkey mind and it brings me into the body and tells my body that it's safe and it can relax. Because when we are busy mind and when we are dysregulated, the body doesn't feel safe. And so it's looking for anything that can go wrong. You know, it's that reptilian brain that's in fight, flight, freeze, and looking for the worst possible scenario, looking for what can go wrong. And so using tapping, I also use a process called havening with myself and with my clients, because you're just really telling the body that it's safe. Havening is a wonderful, and this is also a wonderful practice here, where you're just using your sensory senses to calm yourself down. And practicing that regularly can start to train your brain, your body into a more relaxation response. So this actually came right out of your book. I saw this quote and I thought this was a great quote. Energy psychology is a groundbreaking approach for upgrading your guiding models to support you in overcoming what has limited you and stepping more fully into your highest possibilities. A quote by David Bruder. And you can go, this book by David and Feinstein and Donna Eden goes more into depth about what guiding models are, and I'm going to talk a bit about it. But this is a wonderful book. I really, not because David's here, but because I really like it. I've read a lot of books on tapping, but it's and there's great examples and stories. It's easy to read and it's very informative. But I like to use the word self-concept or even paradigm. It's like the way we see ourselves is based on the experiences that we've had in our life, right? And the decisions that we make in our life. And so in our formative years, if we learn, maybe, you know, the people in our lives are hurting us or not able to be there for us, in our child's mind, oftentimes we think maybe there's something wrong with us, or if I was better, or if I was smarter, or if I was, and so that sort of plays out in your life, not enough, right? And even though as an adult you understand that, you know, that child did the best they could in those circumstances, in those formative years when our brain is the most receptive, sort of in that hypnotic state, those core beliefs about who we are and how we show up in the world and how people interact with us, how other people treat us, are really deeply imprinted. And so we end up having relationships in our life that sort of mirror that, you know, and that's where we have problematic relationships, because they're usually not in our best interest or the other person. And tapping can be a wonderful way to start to shift those patterns in your relationships, and also to help you to get to some of the core beliefs that are having you recreate that in your life on a subconscious level, like not consciously. It's not about blaming or shaming, it's more about that if you do have this belief that, you know, there are no good men in the world because of your experience, then you're going to keep attracting men that are not any good, or, you know, anything else like that. You know, I mentioned that, you know, I grew up very overweight, and there was a lot that went with that. You know, there was being made fun of, a lot of shame about my body, and I had to really work on changing my guiding models. So releasing the energy from those experiences, and then sort of reframing it, like to see myself in a way that is more true, more real. So how I see myself is quite different today. And I can still look back at the memories of seeing like that shy, inhibited, self-conscious little girl, but yet it doesn't drive who I am today. It's sort of like a distant memory. Okay. So it's a cognitive somatic technique, which means it's a mind-body technique. It's under the field of energy psychology. And as I shared before, it's probably one of the most researched practices in energy psychology is EFT, the clinical EFT. And so you're stimulating the various acupoints, and what it's shown to do is decrease the stress response in the body. And it also combines cognitive exposure therapy with light pressure on the acupoints. And what I've seen this work, because I've had clients that have suffered with post-traumatic stress disorder, and this was really the only thing that worked, is that what happens is when you are triggered, it could be a smell, it could be a sound, it just activates that fight, flight, freeze, because the body holds the memory, right? Even though in your head you know there's nothing wrong, like even though, you know, your body is sensing it, so your body gets scared, right? It activates the fight, flight, freeze, it creates all the chemicals in your body to tell you that it's not safe, let's run. And so what you're doing with tapping is, if you're tapping on the pressure points and you're calming the body down with the same exposure while it's happening, you're sending a different message to the body. So now you're sort of rewiring the brain, right? Because you're facing the problematic person or situation or whatever triggered the somatic response, and you are looking at it, you're feeling all the feelings, but you're allowing that to move through you, and you're also calming the body down. So you're basically telling the body that it's safe. And if you do that with maybe a couple of core events that are similar to that, it will often just completely, they call it, it's like the four legs, right? If you topple the three legs, you're gonna, if the issue is on the tabletop and there's four legs of, you know, these things that trigger me, if you release the energy from the three of the legs or even the four of the legs, the issue is going to now be a non-issue. You're not going to be reactive. And I saw that in my life. I had a car accident. I used to get really stressed, feeling like I was doing something wrong after the car accident. And I literally tapped while I was driving. Every time that fear would come up, I didn't close my eyes and, you know, make sure I was. But it really made a difference, because again, it's, you know, the cognitive exposure, right? You have the awareness of it, and yet somatically you're telling the body that it's safe. So you're giving a different signal to the body. And so, in my understanding, this is part of the reason why it works. over 200 research studies, and please, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if I'm not clear with my facts, I would love for you to just jump in, okay? Thank you. So over 200 research studies document energy psychology's effectiveness. And yeah, so tens of thousands of professionals use EFT tapping. More and more psychotherapists use it in their practice, more and more social workers, teachers, physicians. When I started bringing tapping into the classroom, of course I made sure my director of the school was comfortable with it, and then I actually chatted with all the parents in my classroom. I didn't just start doing it with them. I made sure, and the parents were really happy, because I don't know if you know Crestone. Crestone is really alternative anyway, even more than Ashland. And they were really happy to have a way to help their children without medication, And so the effectiveness, we would do tapping every morning in circle. The kids started inviting their parents to join the circle because it was calming them down and they wanted their parents to get some of the benefits. But so what happened was my director had me go to all the classrooms. So I was teaching the K through 12 how to apply tapping. And the kids, the little ones, picked it up immediately. The middle school kids were a little self-conscious, but some of the parents were telling me they were doing it at home when nobody was watching. Yeah, so and when I went to Prescott College, actually, because I met a lot of kids on campus, some of the kids came out to tell me that they had learned it from their parents and that they were using it to help them with, relationship problems or test-taking problems, stress or overwhelm. So we're going to go through a little experience. If you've never done it, it might look a little funny, but it's worth the benefit. I mean, I'm so uncomfortable with it. I'll even be like at the gym on the treadmill tapping. It doesn't bother me to do that. So basically, we're going to talk a little bit about the clinical EFT, some science and research, and a mind-body approach to healing, and how it could be integrated. Yes, Joy.
Clinical EFT, what is that? And what's the other form?
Yeah, so there are numerous now. I mean, since Gary Craig founded EFT, the way I understand it, clinical EFT is it's been more researched. There's the training is very in depth. So to become trained in clinical EFT, because you can do like a YouTube. I mean, not YouTube, but you can buy a training online, and it's great for a foundation. But it's not like when I did my clinical practice, I had to have 50 case studies. I had to have a mentor. So it was much more in depth. Mm-hmm. And the researchers are looking at it. This is the one that has been most researched in the way I understand it.
Well, the definition of clinical EFT is that it's based on the research, and that means that there is a manual. And so when you do research, if you stay with the manual, then it's not apples to oranges. Everybody's doing it in the same way. So the same treatment that works for depression, works for anxiety, etc. So within that manual, there, as Maria said, there's been more than 200 clinical trials that all use that, and so that's what they describe as EFT. What's happened since Gary Craig released it to the world, there's probably as many different forms of EFT as there are therapists teaching it, because everybody puts their own spin on it, but the clinical EFT uses the same manual, so that's how it's defined.
Thank you. That's great. I want to at this point, I know I've been talking a lot, and I know some of you are familiar with tapping, but I want to sort of take the mystery out of it. I'm going to just guide you, just let you know what the actual points are and how it's done. So what we do in EFT is we bring our attention to the problem, and I know that, a lot of times, like I I love affirmations and I love positivity, and I do gratitude journal every day, and I think it's wonderful. But the idea is we're not going to slap a smiley face on top of the pain, right? We're going to acknowledge how we're going to get truthful. Pete just said it, right? We're getting honest with how we're feeling. And we bring our attention to that because that's what we want to unearth, right? That's what we want to clear. If we're just in denial of how we're feeling, and I have found in my work, particularly when I work with addiction, because I have a background in working in addictive behaviors, I studied addiction, I worked in eating disorder unit, that it's easy for us as Westerners to avoid our feelings, to push them down, to stuff them, in our culture it's like you cry and it's like, animals in the wild when they experience trauma, they shake it off. But humans cry and like eat a cookie. And it's well-meaning, but that's what we learn, right? We learn to stuff it down. And we learn to disassociate from our feelings. And this is not everybody, but in my experience personally and professionally, I've noticed that it's really easy. So we want to bring our attention to the problem so we can activate the feelings and the emotions that are connected to it. And so in EFT we have something called the setup statement. And we tap on this part of the hand, it's the soft part of the hand here. And we identify the problem. And as you have seen, it can be applied to a lot of different problems. And sometimes in one round you might feel a shift, or sometimes there's a deeper driver to the problem. But you can first identify the problem, and the setup statement would be, even though I feel stressed when this person looks at me, I'm just making it up, I accept myself and how I feel. Some people say, I deeply and completely accept myself. Or I know there are people that have difficulty accepting themselves. I like to say, wouldn't it be nice if I could accept myself? So there's an acceptance piece. Acceptance of what's going on for you, acceptance of the problem. It could be a physical problem, it could be an emotional problem, okay? So we start with, and we can do this with a typical thing that's usually done in like a workshop, is maybe take a moment and just tune into our breath. So I'm going to invite you, if you like, and please, do what's most comfortable for you. If I ask you to do something that doesn't feel comfortable, take care of yourself. But just tune into your breath and notice how deep you can breathe, without any judgment. Maybe you can have a deep breath, like 100% breath, maybe 50% breath, maybe your breath is shallow. Just sort of take a note of how deep your breathing is or how shallow your breathing is. Don't force it, just notice, okay? And then in your mind, make a little note of, say your breathing is 50%, okay? And then we'll use that as our setup statement. Maybe it's not a problem, but it's just acknowledging what's true, okay? So even though my breathing is, and you fill in the blank, whatever it is, no judgment, no judging yourself, I accept myself. Even though my breathing is, and whatever it is, I deeply and completely accept myself. And I always encourage taking breaths at each point, if you can, if it's comfortable. And I notice somebody's yawning. If you're yawning, that's great. Your body's self-regulating, so try not to hold it in. And then we start with, well, I'll go the classic. So we start right here, tapping on the eyebrow, just with the hair of the eyebrow and the nose. And you can use both hands if they're free, or you can use either hand. It seems to be effective either way. And just notice what that feels like. It's a gentle stimulation. You don't have to do harder. Just notice. And you could breathe in and let it go. And then we have something called the reminder phrase. So you're just thinking about the number of how deep your breath is. I'm going to say 50%. And then you tap on the side of your eye, right there. And take another breath in. And let it go. And tuning into the statement that you made, the setup statement, even though my breath is 50% or whatever it was for you. And then underneath the eye, take another breath in and let it go. And this is where I'm going to put in my energy. I like to say ease and flow, release and let go, because I just feel like it helps the body relax. And I feel like our words are powerful. But just tapping and breathing and allowing, being curious. Top of the lip. Take another breath in and let it go. Crease of the chin. And if this tapping, sometimes I've had people that feel that the tapping felt too aggressive, you can just stimulate also. So listen to your body, you might want to play with it. Sometimes there's a point that you feel like you want to stay on longer. As you learn the basic recipe, you can play with it. It's just like when you're cooking. You learn the basic recipe, and then if you like more salt, you add it. So just breathing and allowing. And then the next point is the collarbone. So it's like toward the middle, underneath the clavicle. Yeah, just breathing and allowing. And then the next point is under the arm. You can do both sides, or you can do it like this. Take another breath in, and let it go. And then you can go to the top of the head. Take a breath in and let it go. And bring your arms down and shake your body out a little bit. And tune into your breath now. And just notice. Now you may or may not, I mean, you're also learning it, so often there's a little stress related to learning something new if this is new. But did anybody notice anything different with their breath? You did, George? Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Isn't this technique coupled with an ultimate truth statement of what you want, why you want it, how your life will be different? Isn't there a writing a paragraph on that you create?
Well,
That's how I was talking.
okay. So you first identify the problem. So that was just the beginning, right? You identify the problem. Yes, ultimately there's a reframe of what it is you want.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, yes, but first we have to acknowledge the problem. We have to release the stress or the energy. And using the breathing is just a very generic way of just introducing this. But absolutely. Ultimately, what you want to do is, if you have a strong reaction to something, or something is stressing you out or triggering you in some way, often I usually start exactly where a person is at, like, you know, maybe their boss is triggering them. Inevitably, if it's a strong response, it's going to go back to a younger time. Because I like to say if it's historical, it's usually, if it's hysterical, if you're hysterical, it's usually historical, like it's a strong reaction. If you know you're overreacting, being curious about it. But what'll happen then is we want to clear up the energy from, it could be that incident, or maybe it goes to a younger time. Doesn't, you know, we don't have to overanalyze it. And once we shift that energy, then we tune into what it is that person wants? What is it that, what do we need to do to evolve that energy, you know? Or like I was recently working with someone who we went back to a time where she was being bullied and she was feeling impotent. Like she went to freeze mode and she couldn't protect herself. And And what she wanted was to feel empowered. She wanted to kick him, but she couldn't because she was freezing. She was a little girl in school, you know. So basically, after we took all the energy around, I'm like, so what does she want to do? She wants to kick him. I'm like, let her kick him, you know. Like what? And so we play in the field of, you know, what needs to happen to evolve the energy, and how would it feel if she did have the power, or how would it feel if she had somebody there to advocate? So we go many different places based on the
Okay.
person's needs.
Thank you.
Ultimately, we don't just leave you there with the problem. Oftentimes though, just tapping on the problem, you will feel a sense of distance from it. But to have a complete circle of where you want to go. Now I sometimes, if I'm working with somebody who's really experienced a lot of trauma, I sometimes do some just bringing in some positive energy, having them remember some, it's like some healing is really good to just not necessarily go to all of that trauma. I once worked with someone who was tapping on the trauma, and his energy was just so depleted. So sometimes bringing in some of the positive. So that's my style, and that, as was shared before, you'll find a variety of people that work a variety of ways. I feel like there's an organic process, and having your finger on the pulse of what's needed for that person is very relevant. So if you didn't feel a shift, it's likely that maybe there was something else stressing you out, or sometimes people will feel even more because we have a tendency to minimize how we're feeling. So you can apply it with a problem, like say somebody at work is stressing you out, or you're having a reaction to someone, the same way. Even though when I think about so-and-so, it makes me feel, if you can get to how you feel, that's wonderful, okay? Because we want to get into the feeling. We want to get into the body, right, the somatic. And then the setup statement would be identifying the problem. I go here first because I do this, the recipe a little bit different at times. There are other points as well, but the basic recipe are these points. Setup statement. Sometimes just tapping on this will calm down the whole body, especially if you're familiar with it. If you're familiar with it, it's like Pavlov's dog. After a while, you just have to do this, and the whole body's just going to remember that, you know, that's where you're going. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Over here and then there. Yes, go ahead.
There's just that, first slide I saw after I sat down, where it was you and a man sitting in the grass, okay? And it was, the words were, and you send a calming signal. So, and I've done tapping over time, and so I've been, why is it calming if you're talking about how is it calming? I guess I would say. You're talking about the problem. This crazy thing that just happened to me, oh my gosh, I'm so upset about it. You know, it's like you're reinforcing so why is that calming?
That's a great question. So when something is triggering or upsetting to you, you're calming the body, and you're letting the body know that it's safe. So you're actually, you're reframing the body's response to something that is triggering.
With your words? You're
No, not your
calming the
words.
body?
You're stimulating. The words are reminding you of what's got you activated, right?
Right.
You're thinking about it, and you're telling the body though, you're calming the body while it's activated.
How is it calming the body?
Well, because you're stimulating the points, which has shown to calm down the body, right?
Is that
That's
turning on the
part I don't
parasympathetic?
understand.
So that's what, the way I understand it, it's activating, it's regulating your nervous system, it's activating the parasympathetic, so you're calming the body, you're basically telling the body that
You acknowledge it?
you're acknowledging it, but you're diffusing the energy, because your reaction to it, do you understand what I'm saying? It's like,
No,
so
there's
if somebody's
that's part
triggered,
of the sentence, I don't think it's being said somehow.
okay,
It's
let me
like
see if I can explain it
You're
this way.
stimulating it, and how is that calming?
Well, by just doing this without saying anything, that'll calm down the body, right?
Oh,
That's what it's been shown to do. It's
Okay.
calming down the body. The words are bringing your attention to something that
right.
jacks up the body, right? So you're giving your body, so for instance, if somebody triggers you all the time, you walk into the office and somebody's there and he's always triggering you, when you calm down the body, eventually you're not going to be triggered by that person anymore. That's where we're
Just by
going.
touching the point calms it? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what the evidence is showing, that it changes. And do you want to jump in here at all?
Well, there was a 10-year study at Harvard in the medical school that was showing that stimulating certain acupuncture points sends signals to the brain that reduce activation. So you think of this person that's really upsetting you, and your nervous system, your limbic system, your amygdala goes into a stress response. You tap, the signals are now deactivating signals, so they bring it down. So you're holding the thought, but your body's not responding in the same way because the brain has shifted its response. It's
It's almost like a
deactivated.
release behind it.
Yeah, it's sending, well,
It's like touching it
Yeah.
opens up the
mhm.
energy to flow.
Sending
out.
a signal. It's sending a signal that, just like hitting a key on your keyboard sends a signal. This one, the signal is deactivate.
Thank you for that question. Kathy, you had a question?
My question is there any, we can just tap anywhere we want, there's no pattern to the tapping?
So there is a basic recipe, here, 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 here.
But in that order?
In that order is the way it's taught. However, it's very flexible. I mean, when they do the research and all of that, they're using the same protocol, right? And as I shared before, what I have found is that, you know, sometimes one point might call you more, or you feel like I actually do a sequence that's a little different personally now, because I'm doing it so many years, and so you can actually play with it, and it's very generous. And like I said, you know, I noticed it's like my grandson tends to go like this when he's thinking. It's really interesting how, you know, we organically, like you might hold yourself here, or so sometimes the body just sort of organically knows what to do to sort of take care of you, right? To find some homeostasis and balance there. Is that helpful, Kathy?
Yeah.
Yes, Joy.
And then the places that we tap are the ends of the meridians. The meridians are the energy paths through the body. And it's, sorry, my understanding that
Yeah.
when you tap on the end of the meridian, that it makes the flow go through the meridian, whereas it gets stuck, the energy gets stuck at some point. And so that calms down the body because you're not holding the energy in one place. You're allowing the energy to flow.
Yes, absolutely.
That's Chinese medicine.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's the way I understood it, although Pete had something different to say about that. But I do feel that, you know, when you're stimulating, like you're releasing and you're getting the energy flowing. And our emotions are really energy. And a lot of times when we have a lot of stuck, like I have a real strong body-mind connection. Like I've had physical pain in my body, and when I released the fear, the pain literally went away. Dr. John Sarno, I don't know if anybody's here has heard of him, but he has a book called Healing Back Pain. And he's written a lot about the mind-body connection, how often the tension in the body is holding emotion, because maybe we're afraid to feel it, or we're really not, so it's sort of stuck in the body, and it shows up as pain in the body. And I know for myself that when I've experienced some back pain or knee pain, when I did the energy work around it, it changed. I tried all kinds of things, and then finally my husband's like, well, why aren't you doing energy work on it? To go to everything. And that was the thing that worked. I mean, a few years ago, I remember I had this knee pain, and it was really, I was making a lot of changes in my life, and it was a lot of fear. So, yeah. Alan, you had a question?
Yeah, it sounds like, I know nothing about this, but it sounds like a self-hug.
Self-hug?
Because when someone is upset, you hug them and you go, they're there. You tap. So it just, what you're describing, and why it would work, to answer the other question, it just seems like a self-hug.
Well, hugs are great, right?
Yeah.
Hugs are great. There's a process called havening where you're literally hugging yourself in a way. Yes, Ronnie?
I've heard about EFT for a long, long time. Now that I couldn't stop tapping. It was like, I didn't even think about it. It just, she talked about 80% of it's proven 80% of the time that it works. What about the other 20%? What's not working?
That's not actually what she said.
What did she
It's,
correct me?
it's working way more than 99% of the time. Of the 200 clinical trials in peer-reviewed journals, it's worked like 197 times that at least one targeted symptom has reduced to a statistically significant degree. So I'm not sure I don't remember what the 80% was.
But you remember that she said 80%, and I thought it was.
Oh, I know what it was. It was 80%. The correspondence between the meridians as they were mapped in ancient China and the body's connective tissue, that there was an 80% correspondence between those.
Yeah. It's fun. I think I had a lot of fun.
It's fun, and it's really effective in so many ways. I understand in the UK now they're using it with veterans. I've had the opportunity to work with people with post-traumatic stress disorder, and this was the only thing that helped them. I've seen dramatic changes in my personal life with using these practices, and yeah, I mean, I have clients that are like, I had one client once, I remember she worked on something like almost 20 years of therapy, and in one session we got to it. Because what I understand is when you're talking about something that's activating, you're dysregulated now, and your thinking is not clear, and you don't really understand what's driving it. But when you're calming the body and you're talking about something, then it's like the light bulbs go off, and it's like, oh, that's what it was that was triggering the whole thing, right? Because sometimes we're working on this, this, and this, because we have all these stresses in our life, but the real stressor is, and when you're stressed, everything is a problem, right? Think about times when you're stressed and how you interact with people, or you in traffic, or you're behaving. It's like everything seems problematic, but oftentimes there's like a core thing that, like I noticed something happened yesterday in my family, and I felt really, last night my muscles got tight, and I was like, something happened today, and it was something that triggered something for me, that my body was going into that reaction. But I know now that when my body gets tight, that there's something that got triggered, and then I can tap, and I can just get more centered into what's coming up for me. Let me see if I have. So this is in Lithia Park, and this is more of the same. This is a client, I wanted to just share this. So this is somebody who had suffered with post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is, of course, this was her experience. This is not everybody's experience always, but she was in physical pain, suffered from irritable bowel, her mind was foggy, she couldn't have a normal relationship. And she really has learned to release her stress and feel her blocks to inner peace. She's made such a shift in her, I mean, she's now living in Europe, yeah, but such a dramatic change has been for her. So I just wanted to highlight that. And this is something that, basically what you were talking about with the energy flow, and this is something that is energy EFT, which talks more about the flow of energy, and when there's blockages in the flow, that our energy is not flowing, and oftentimes, I'm a yoga teacher, and I'm actually studying somatic yoga now. When we have blockages, it's like we don't have circulation in parts of our body. And sometimes there's an emotional component to those blockages as well. There's a physiological, but there'll also be an emotional. And these are the points. Now there are other points that are used and can be used, and there's even people who do whole body tapping. I think it's great to just shake everything up. I think, shaking the body's been shown for trauma release. Jumping on a rebounder is great. I like to do whole body tapping. It gets everything flowing. But this is basically the basic recipe. I sometimes use liver points here, and there's also something here where we do some gamut point tapping, and I'll explain that in a moment. But anyway, let me see. So this is some of the research Dr. Stapleton was talking about with food cravings, which I find to be really exciting, because I do help a lot of people with food addiction and healing their relationship with food. And so participants were put in an MRI and shown pictures of yummy foods like chocolate, donuts, takeaways, and it increased the neural activity, right? So this was the baseline. This was the control, okay? So the control were excited by the foods, and then they were they didn't do any tapping, this group. It stayed the same. But this was then after a female tapped. So this is the light up is the activation, and after 4 weeks, there's much less. You see? The male is even more prominent. So this is the baseline, and the orange is basically the light up when they saw the food, and then the other one basically pretty clear there, right? And it's not that you never want it. Like, I've done this with myself, and I remember having a client once where she was running out in the middle of the night for ice cream, and she was very health conscious, but it was like, controlling her life. And when we did some of the work, I'll get to it in one moment, we worked on the craving, because you can, there's ways of working on the actual craving, the sensation, the taste, the smell, the experience. But what was really relevant in our work was that she had a memory of when she was a little girl, and her mother would come home from the grocery store, and she had 6 siblings, and they would sit around the kitchen table and have ice cream together. And now she lived across the country by herself, and every time she was missing her family on a subconscious level, she was craving ice cream. And till this day, and this happened, we did this like 3 or 4 years ago, and every once in a while she texts me still, and she eats ice cream now when she wants, but she's not running out in the middle of the night eating ice cream, because she's not, she was subconsciously looking for that nurturing, like now she calls her siblings or her, so it's having that awareness of, what's really going on here. So that was her experience. And then we're gonna,
Maria,
yes. Oh, sorry, Mark.
During that 4-week period, what was the practice that they would do?
Yeah, so I forget exactly. It's actually in this
Well,
book.
yeah.
This is her book, The Science of Tapping. I think that they tapped,
They did it in the group, they
Yeah.
met twice a week for about 2 hours,
Oh, yeah.
and they would just do the
No,
tapping.
2 hours of tapping,
2 hours of tapping.
A week.
And
twice a week.
Twice a
twice a week, okay.
for 4 weeks,
Nice,
yeah.
nice, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting because that's like a reverse with the ice cream. It's like you're wanting to bring something not good connected to something good. Because ice cream is bringing, it's a good memory, it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's a bad thing with the talking.
Well, she had associated the ice cream with the connection to family, and which,
Had to
so
be
she, so
reversed.
when we're overeating, sometimes we're, you know, so a vat of ice cream is not gonna fulfill the need to be connected with your family. So it's sort of like, I like to use the expression, it's like you're going to the hardware store for milk, right? It's like, you're not gonna, you know, you think that that's what's gonna make it better, but what's really gonna make it better is, you know, reaching out to one of your siblings and, yeah, it's interesting how our minds work.
Yeah.
And food has such a strong emotional connection, you know, it's an interesting thing. In all of, my years ago in New York, when I worked in a substance abuse facility, I mean, food and gambling were probably the two of the hardest, because it's like an inside job. It's like you don't put the cork in the bottle and swear off. You have to address it, right? And it brings up all kinds of memories. So basically, this is, you know, the acu-tapping calms the amygdala. Tapping, known as acupoint, sends the deactivating signals to the amygdala, and that's what Peter Stapleton was talking about. And with repeated sessions of EFT tapping, the signal outweighs the activating signals of the stress. So that's why over time, and then if you do it regularly, and you don't have to do it like for 2 hours at a time, what I suggest to my clients or my friends is just like setting a timer for 5 minutes in the morning. If you have an issue, by all means, it's great to tap on. If you have a chronic issue or some trauma that you want to, it's really good to work with an experienced practitioner, because you can get more specific, you can clear, and it's also really good to have somebody hold space for you, because I mean, I've done, you know, trades with my peers, and even hired people at times in my own healing journey, because it's like a dentist doesn't do root canal on themselves, so you want to get the proper.
I did not mean to imply that they were tapping for 2 hours. They're a group, they're checking in, talking about their week, all of that, but, because the tapping really doesn't take that long.
How long?
That depends on
Give
what
me a
you're doing,
range.
but,
Range?
from 5 minutes to an hour.
And to your point, the tapping, it's really getting very specific about what you're tapping on, right? So that's why I said, I think years ago, Ann Adams, who was a practitioner, used to say, for results to be terrific, you want to be specific. So it's what you, and you could be tapping on like all kinds of erroneous things, but you gotta, if you're getting to what you're really, what really is. So sometimes in the conversation, or, you know, peeling the onion, then you get to, you know, the core of it. But I find with addictions, it's really interesting, because as I've shared, I've had issues with food and weight. I've had multiple eating disorders, and so healing my relationship with food and body image has been like a lifelong process for me. And I found that what I find so wonderful about like food addiction is that a lot of times when we feel a craving, we want to suppress it. But with tapping, it actually, and when you suppress anything, it's like sitting on a beach ball in the water. Eventually, it's going to pop up. But if you let that craving move through you, it's gone. And some people can do it with mindfulness and breath, but tapping actually will speed up the process and the craving will go away. And if it's a true hunger, then you'll eat, but if it's just like an emotional craving or something to sort of suppress a feeling or avoid something, it's very likely it'll move through you. Yes, Ronnie?
When you tap, listening to you, it sounds like you need to have something in your mind that you're tapping for. Can you just tap, just to tap?
Yeah, so the way I do it and the way I have a YouTube channel with lots of videos actually. And some of them people are like, I've been tapping to this all week and I've dropped a couple pounds and I broke up with my relationship. Some people really get a lot from that, And that being said, some people, it's very based on the person. But what I like to do, and what I often share with my clients, is just tapping. And I like them to say ease and flow, release and let go, and just calming down the body. Now, if you have an issue, by all means, you want to tap on the issue. But you can just stimulate the points and breathe and relax and ease and flow. And I use it before I sit for meditation. I'm not tapping on anything particular. I'm just calming my body. Or maybe I had a bad dream, Sometimes I have a dream so I'll just tap to release it. Yes. Did that answer your question?
Sure.
Yes.
So it's both general and specific. You
Absolutely.
can do it for the hell of it,
You can do
and
it.
to whatever, calm
If you're
down.
feeling
like-
anxious, if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling, helped a lot.
But even if you're not feeling anything
Yeah, if you're not
specific.
feeling anything, you just want to get more present, or you just want to practice. I find it's just a great tool to just practice being in your body.
It doesn't necessarily, if you're tapping, it doesn't necessarily uncover, oh my God, I found my big problem, right?
Well,
I mean, or it doesn't.
well, if you're looking for something, if you're looking for a problem,
Well, not necessarily,
I'll
but
give you
there are
a-
many, so.
okay, so the point is though, that if
They
you want to
just-
just tap it to relax your body, but if you have, a compelling issue that you want to address, then you have to be specific. And,
But that's a mental thing,
well, it's
to be specific about it.
to be specific, I mean, it doesn't have to be that esoteric, it's
No.
just like something that's showing up in your life right now
Sure,
can be the problem, right?
sure.
And you may, as you unravel it, realize that, it might be related to something, it might not be related, it might be something right there.
That's what I'm saying, that it can uncover something that's
It's absolutely
more
can uncover.
underneath.
Absolutely can uncover, yes. And that's been my experience, and that's
But
what,
it works more if you're specific to begin with, whatever is underneath, that little specific whatever, is going to be more effective for finding what's underneath, if you start with the specific.
yeah, but you can be sometimes being very general is the first,
We'll do it
like you're
too.
just feeling overwhelmed. Even though I'm overwhelmed, and then maybe it'll go like, okay, well, maybe I'm feeling overwhelmed because I was feeling stressed about something, and, so you can go in like one session, you can start to like peel the onion. But you can start exactly where you're at, and as you're calming yourself down, because you may not know what's specific. Like I
Exactly,
shared before, I had a
exactly.
client who worked on something for years in therapy, she couldn't get specific because she was too activated. So, yeah. And if you're finding that you're not feeling relaxed from it, or something is in the way, it's not that there's something wrong with you, or it's not the numbers are very high. It's just that maybe there's some body wisdom there that is not, it's not, you're not ready to like drop in. I've been tapping for probably 15 years now, and I have memories that are just coming,
Right.
that like something happened yesterday that triggered like a childhood memory for me, and I felt it in my body, and today it got resolved. But 15 years of tapping, you know, but that was my experience, yes.
Are there any breathing techniques to go along with the tapping?
So, I think breath is really important. I don't believe that, it's good to breathe, but I don't remember in my training necessarily being so focused on the breath.
Because I've heard with the breathing out, like the om and just humming, it refocuses, say, intrusive thoughts to more physical. So similar to tapping.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds or refocuses from what's up here to the body more.
Yeah, I think the verbal, even like moaning or saying the words out loud, it's really powerful. But I believe breath work is amazing, and we have lots of findings around that as well. So combining the two is really helpful.
Also, are the meridians connected to the chakras also? So like you did tapping, and then that's like the crown chakra? Is
Yeah, so
maybe
I
not?
don't know or think that they are necessarily connected, but I
Okay.
do believe in like the chakras, but I don't know if there's science behind
Okay.
that, to be honest with you. I'm a yoga teacher, so, chakra system. But I do, know that often there's a lot of, if a person's having difficulty expressing themselves, or, the bridge from the head to the heart, there's usually congestion here. So cleansing, clearing that. I have a video on clearing the throat chakra, by the way, and it's been really helpful in just helping to just get that flow going. Yes?
What is it with the tapping the head being the final, is there some connection with that you've actually connected with that part of the brain that you're trying to diffuse the stress, the
So
pain, or whatever?
the way I understand it is the basic recipe is just a sequence so that you can remember. But I don't believe that there's any wisdom of like having to do one point as opposed, in any particular sequence, so much as it's just easy to remember.
Is this a place where there's a lot of acupuncture lines coming together? I don't even know.
Yeah, I forget
I know
what this
there's
meridian
the
is, I know
light
Donna
in the brain.
What is it? It's the crown chakra, of course, but there's,
Yeah, it is, but
it could be what is
it's
this called?
interesting. I've done those type points.
Yeah. Honestly, when I do my own tapping,
You're
I usually
finished
stop.
now when you're up there.
Well, depending on the system, there's more than 200 acupuncture points on the body. So which ones you tap on really is kind of anybody's guess, because lots of different practitioners use different points. They all seem to work. It's just kind of enough points. Like we were talking about the meridian end points, those are generally favored. But you can also do other points. And so it's really, what's really interesting is that the studies, when they compare tapping on recognized acupuncture points with points that are not acupuncture points, the acupuncture point treatments are much more effective. Just tapping on the body randomly does not do it, but tapping on the acupuncture points, and it's really up in the air which points are the best, but the points that you showed, Gary's points, are effective because we know they work. So we haven't really looked that far, but Roger Callahan, who you mentioned, he actually has a way of energy testing, muscle testing, to find which points are needed for a particular situation. Is that necessary? That's not been put to a test. What Gary did that was really brilliant was he said, here's a one-size-fits-all. Here's a way that you don't have, it's not complicated, you just do it and it works.
And that's why I think the benefit of just learning the basic recipe, and as I shared before, coming into a relationship with your body and sort of listening to what your body wants, and there is a connection So your body will often give you messages at one point. Like I had a client who, she literally had not slept through the night in like 2 years. She had a very traumatic car accident. And this was the point. Like we did some deep work in my office, but she went home with this point, and she slept through the night for the first time in a couple of years because this just calmed her whole body down. So that worked for her, you know. Yes.
I'd like to hear more about what you did with little kids.
Yes.
Because I can see how this, especially with a baby, would be really useful, since they can't even talk, but you could tap, perhaps.
Yeah.
But if you have to tap a very, when you're talking about tapping very specifically on a point, I mean, the collarbone's pretty large.
Yeah, yeah.
And finding the right point, how do you do that?
So I haven't worked with babies, and I would think that I would be cautious. I mean, just gently touching the baby's face and could be very soothing. With children, I worked as little as 4 years old, and they can do the points. And we really talked about, I mean, with the very young ones, we just did like, almost like, there was this video that we used to do, like, I'm a happy kid, and they would just tap, and it wasn't really, we didn't focus on having a problem so much as just that. But in, like, and in my circle, like, I taught 4th and 5th grade in that school, so every day in circle, we would do sort of like a generic tapping, but, and if there was something coming up though, that was like stressful, then I would have the children think about, you know, what was stressing them out the most about that, and then we would just tap, acknowledging the stress, like if there was a performance, because this was a charter school and the 4th and 5th graders had to like get in front of the whole school, and 5th grade girls were intimidated by, you know, the middle school and high school boys. So I had them do the tapping, also did some other kinesiology, you know, I would have them stand in their power pose and, you know, just really feel themselves, you know. And then I worked with some kids individually. Like I had one child who had a lot of energy. He was very, and I remember the ukulele teacher would come in and she didn't have great classroom management skills. So he would be like literally climbing on the counters and under, because he was just so buzzed with that, you know, between everybody tuning the ukulele and no, you know, sense of peace in the class. And I would pull him out with permission from his mother, and we would tap. And I would ask him, like, where do you, he would literally say, because I said, do you feel it in your body? He's like, yeah, I just feel this energy in my legs, like I have to run. And we would do some tapping, and then he'd come back into the room, and I would literally, like, I would say to my assistant, I should take a picture of him, because he's like sitting quietly and like listening. It would be pretty amazing. I have found that, and I haven't done, you know, I've worked in that one school, and my grandchildren also, I've worked a little bit with them. I have found that kids are very receptive. If they're not in that awkward age like middle school where they're self-conscious, they're very receptive, and you clean it up. I know I'm in, like, on some groups with other people that do this work, and some of them, their niche is working with kids, except you clean them up, you clear it up right away, because they're like right there, you know, they're honest, and they're very receptive, and then they have the technique, and they'll use it, you know. I remember my grandson, when I taught him, he was much younger, and he was really upset with his father. He's in there like, even though it was cute though. Yes.
So you mentioned about the lady that tapping helped improve her overeating ice cream. Can it help with more extreme things like heavy addictions or serious crimes?
So
I know
it's
it's straight, like it's.
well, well, it has been shown with addiction. There are people that really specialize in like hardcore addiction. It's been shown to help with craving, withdrawal, calming down the nervous system. There's a lot of pieces to it. If you want to, I mean, I've helped clients quit smoking. You have to want to, but it will eliminate, I mean, I had one client that was sort of shocked because in the previous, when she would try the patches, she didn't even really need the patches.
So what was the quick secret to quit smoking and tapping? Or-
Well,
I mean, I know it's,
everybody's individual, you know? I mean, it could be a quick thing, and sometimes, you know, smoking, there's smoke screens, maybe
My dad
there's things in
smoked
your
for-
life you don't wanna see,
Yeah.
or, you know, there could be like an emotional piece to
he
it.
smoked for 30-some years, and then he went to a hypnotist, I think, that did tapping, and then he quit, but until, I mean, even through his whole life, he still believed he did it himself.
Who was this?
My dad.
Oh, really? But he quit.
Yeah, so I'm like, it totally worked, of course.
Yeah. And,
I
well, that's
did
the
it
interesting
myself.
thing is that sometimes, because sometimes the issues that you're working on become non-issues anymore, that you don't even necessarily attribute it, they call it the apex effect, right? You don't necessarily attribute it to the tapping, because it's like, oh, I didn't even have that problem. And it's interesting because a lot of times, like, I'll like, on the intake, the client will tell me, you know, and I'm like, oh, and they're like, oh, I don't even remember that was an issue, you know? Because, which is a good thing,
It's either
right?
like subconscious or unconscious level, maybe.
Well, I think what happens is it becomes like a remote memory almost. It's not like it goes away, but it's like you're not, it's not who you are anymore. It's not how you identify yourself with anymore. And so the things, and I find in my life too, the things that, you know, may have triggered me or may have made me feel really emotional, it's like I can look at them, I can even talk about those things that were pretty crazy with a sense of, yeah, like, that's pretty sad that I had to go through that, but not like, you know, devastated by it, or, so it's interesting. It takes a lot of the charge away. It doesn't take your memory away, but it becomes, you become like not triggered by it, I guess is my best word for it. Is there any other?
I got a question for you.
Yes.
So what we did was, in my opinion, active tapping. Does passive tapping work? Can I tap someone else and have that have an effect?
Well, you know, Gary Craig used to tap on others,
Uh-huh.
and there are people that tap on others. I mean, you can do it with
So
children.
it's not
or-
totally weird.
Not totally weird at all. It's actually, I mean, I had a little boy in my class who used to get paralyzed in the playground, and he would actually ask one of the people to come out, and I would like tap on him, because he was too like immobilized to do it himself. So yes, it can be done. Of course, you want to have permission, and if you're a practitioner, you have to make sure that you're within your, you know, that you can touch a client. But yes, it can be done. And there's even something called the tapping teddy bear, where they've had
Oh, wow.
children tap on the points of the teddy bear,
Yeah.
which is interesting too. So maybe identifying the problem and the points on the finger. I don't know exactly how that works, but it's been effective. Somebody have a question over here? Yes.
Well, I'm trying to relate it to a situation I have. I have blood pressure, real serious. Sometimes it gets very, very high. And I've done everything with all my supplements and the pharmaceuticals and everything, and I'm still, I know I have a lot. I have just like a understanding of the danger it is to my body, because I know my mom died of a big stroke after 25 years of high blood pressure, and I've had that long. And so I have, you know, I don't want to die. I want this to, and so I'm encouraged to do tapping for it. My daughter reminds me of tapping when I'm telling her, you know, it's getting really weird tonight. But so I'm not sure. The trick is to how to do the, what do they call it, the script. How to, you know, I can come up with the issue that I'm really concerned
Yeah.
about. My blood pressure's really high, it's really high, yes it is, you know. And then how to turn that around. Am I just talking about the emotions that I'm having about the high blood pressure? Or can I really get the body determined to lower the blood pressure, which is a total
Both.
chronic thing.
Both.
You know,
Both.
that's what I haven't done, is talk about the emotions.
Yeah.
So
So as David's saying,
that's what I'm
both,
thinking tonight would be,
both.
because it's not just my emotions causing it, it's
Right.
really,
Yeah, it's a constellation.
but will the body lower my blood pressure because I'm doing the technique? I mean, is that-
Everybody's different, but the research would be encouraging.
Well, I would love to save my life by the, you know, to have this as one more tool. I
Yeah.
can really do it, cause you know, there's many times that everything I've been studying for 20 years is not getting to it from,
Yeah,
you know, the medicine.
But it's the kind of thing, like you were saying, that there is a point where you need a practitioner, because we all have our blind spots. And so whatever you would pick up that you wouldn't necessarily, it wouldn't occur to you, a skilled practitioner is going to be able to take you in that direction, because there's no one formula for
Right.
blood pressure. It's really very individual, having to do with your history, having to do with the way your body responds to one round of tapping. You know, with breathing, that's also something you pay attention to. It's not something you necessarily
Yeah.
try
I'm
to
not- I'm
get
not
the person
seeing
to
it
breathe.
lower it
But you
very
notice,
much.
if you notice that when you're thinking about certain things, your breathing pattern changes, that's something that the practitioner pays attention to. And that will impact the next round of tapping. So,
Maybe I could make a suggestion to my body. Do this 3 times and then we'll see.
But as David
lower
said, you know,
blood pressure.
the mind is trying to solve the problem,
I know.
but we're sometimes so close to ourselves that we're addressing the wrong. Like, I'll give you an example. It's not the same thing with blood pressure, but I had a client who came to me who, she wanted to lose a few pounds. Beautiful young woman. And she thought she had a weight problem, but she really had an intimacy problem, because the pounds were all about fear of dating and being attractive. And so we could, you know, she could go on diet, but if she doesn't address that, she didn't need a diet, because actually as we're working on the intimacy, the weight's taking care of itself. So we don't always realize that that's, you know, the core of it, you know. And so sometimes having another set of eyes, or somebody who's trained, who is familiar with, and yes, calming yourself down and identifying the emotions that are coming to up can be a great start. And it can be helpful to work with someone that can help you just sort of uncover it. But, you know, working.
Yeah, and everybody has their own idea of what's causing, other people have their idea of what's.
Well, the thing is, you see
Because
the
I'm
difference.
making it up or something.
The difference
that's why
with
my
working
blood pressure-
as an EFT practitioner, I don't have scripts, I don't have an idea of
Right.
what is going to help you. I hold the space and I ask the questions and we do the tapping, and I, based on your feedback of what I'm observing and hearing, is where we go. I don't know from the
Right.
onset. I have an idea of what you tell me, but it's an exploration
Right,
for both of us.
right.
Make sense? That's why
Yeah.
you can't have like a one size fits all, because even with like weight issues or whatever, everybody has a unique,
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there.
Yeah.
I just really do have, even other things, even just anxiety situations or whatever, having an idea of what to do, of how to move the script along, how to what to say, you know.
Well, calming yourself down and telling your body it's safe is a good beginning. Yeah. Okay, I think we're, how are we doing in time? Oh, it's time? Okay.
Just about out of time.
Oh, wow, okay. Well, they are, I have some handouts, actually. The ACEP is a great resource because it can give you a lot of the background, it can give you a lot of the current studies. These 3 books are wonderful. This is Peter Stapleton's book, which shows a lot of the evidence and research, the brain scans. This is, of course, David Feinstein and Donna Eden's book, Tapping. Wonderful book, great resource. And then this is also a wonderful initiative, trauma tapping technique, where they go to like war-torn countries and they teach the youth, there's a couple initiatives where Lori Layton went to Rwanda and they're teaching the youth how to apply tapping, and they're doing like group tapping. And this is a wonderful book about how, we can help people that are struggling, collective groups of people. Again, I appreciate you all being here tonight.